Welcome to part 4 on my series on the Apostolic Fathers, where I am making the case for why you both can and should read the earliest church authors. Today's video is on what might be the most well-known, and to some, at the same time, thanks to the title of the work, might be the most intimidating of the Apostolic Fathers, and that is the Didache. Maybe you've heard other people speak about it and you've always wondered, what is the Didache? The Didache's full title, translated into English, is The Teaching of the 12 Apostles. The Greek word for teaching is Didache, so the book goes by the shortened name Teaching, and we still use the Greek term for some reason, I don't know. One of the interesting historical notes on the Didache was that until 1873, we only possessed fragments of this document and didn't know what was in it, until in that year we discovered a manuscript from 1056 that contained the entire Didache. We don't know who wrote it. The date is kind of hard to determine, but scholars estimate the range between the year 80 and 120. So it could possibly be the first known writing after the New Testament was completed, or even written before the New Testament was done. Regardless of the specific date, this is a very early document. So let's talk about what's in the teaching of the 12 apostles. Welcome to Rev Reads. If you want to discover more of the earliest writings in church history, along with what is coming out this day, please subscribe to the channel in order to stay up with the most current book reviews. And also, please like this video, share it with other people online, help them know about the teaching of the 12 apostles. The Didache is a handbook for Christian living. And it's only about 10 pages long in Rick Brannon's The Apostolic Fathers. So again, this is something you can read. It's not so much about what we might consider to be theology, but it's more about the walk of the Christian life, how to worship the Lord, and it ends with a chapter on anticipating the end times. The Didache presents two ways of life for the Christian. One is the way of death, the other is the way of life. The way of life can be summed up in loving God and loving your neighbor, and you will be blessed if you follow the way of life. The way of death, on the other hand, is defined by a list of sins, very similar to what you might find in the New Testament, an example being such as Colossians 3's list. The way of death is evil, cursing, lust, malice, pride, and so forth. The Christian is called to put on the yoke of the teaching of the apostles, which would mean in the context to follow the commandments, flee from every evil thing, and to be at peace in the body of Jesus Christ. There's really a major emphasis in all of the Apostolic Fathers on pursuing peace in your local assembly, probably reflecting both the importance of peace in the local church and also the difficulty on maintaining peace in the body. Following this section, the attention turns to what we would call corporate worship, the fellowship together of the body of Christ. It begins with baptism. The intriguing note is that there's no mention of the baptism of infants, and before someone is baptized, they are to first review the apostles' teachings, and then both the one who is baptized and the one who will do the work of baptism are to fast. Then pouring water on the individual is only acceptable if there is no running water available in which to dunk the person into. The Didache is a Baptist document. On the section on fasting and prayers, you can see legalism creeping into the church in a rather humorous way. The author writes about hypocrites who fast on Monday and Thursday, while you, the good Christian, should fast on Wednesday and Friday. It's obviously a petty judgment on others and also a legalistic demand to fast on certain days. So we can see legalism coming into the church at the very beginning. On the Lord's Supper or the Eucharist, nothing is given to present evidence for either a transubstantiation or a memorial view of the Lord's Supper. Pretty much everybody in the church should be able to follow the instructions presented on the Lord's Supper in this work, as in those who take the Lord's Supper are those who have been baptized first. We are called to give thanks for the food that we partake of. And the way that it follows that instruction in the Lord's Supper, it makes for the most natural reading that the Lord's Supper was seen as one part of an entire meal to give thanks for, and not just simply a sip of wine and a bite of bread. There's a chapter then on judging if a prophet, the one who teaches you, is a genuine prophet. One of the tests, interestingly enough, is if the prophet demands payment. If he demands payment, he's a false prophet, and you're not to listen to them. We are then told to be welcoming to everyone, but to be aware of those who want to enter the fellowship and remain idle. Everyone in the church is supposed to work. And while we're to welcome all, encourage all to work, we don't want to keep supporting those who refuse to work. True prophets are to be honored, and our confession of sins should not be to those prophets or teachers, but we're to make our confession of sins to one another when we wrong someone. So if I wrong you, I should confess my sins to you, but that confession should be just between me and the person I wronged. The two roles mentioned in this work for church leadership are the overseers, or the bishops, and the deacons. Very similar to what we saw in the letters of Ignatius, but in Ignatius it was the bishops and the elders. So this may mean that there was a citywide bishop with elders under him, and the elders and deacons worked together in partnership in the leadership of the church, but we're all guessing a little bit here because we don't have a lot of details to go on. The Didache then ends with a chapter on eschatology. The first thing to note about the Lord's coming is that no one knows the hour when the Lord will come. So if your view on the Lord's return has predictions for when the Lord will come back, well, the Didache would not approve. We are encouraged to live in anticipation of the Lord's return, which could be at any moment. Now, some people are going to hate this, but I'm going to say it anyway. But it kind of sounds dispensational the way that it's stated, like there's a rapture of the church, and then the final days of the false prophet, a singular deceiver who will perform signs and wonders. There'll be burning and judgments. People will be led astray. Others whose faith endures until the end will be saved by Christ himself. Then the world will see the Lord's coming upon the clouds of heaven. You could easily take the first two verses of this chapter as referring to the rapture. Then verses 3 through 5 as the tribulation, and verses 6 and 7 as the second coming. Now, I know that's probably going to generate some pretty harsh disagreements along the lines of non-dispensationalists who might watch this review, but I gotta say I'm welcome to be proving wrong, but how I read the Didache, that's what it appears to be saying to me. And if you don't like my views on baptism or the end times as related to what the Didache says, I encourage you to read the entire thing yourself. That's the whole goal of this. And let me know what you think about the teachings of the 12 apostles, because to me, they sound very Baptist and maybe a tad dispensational.